Hey everybody, it's Tim hitting the beast of the marching arts. Thank you so much for watching. We are going to talk about leadership, and I'm here with one of the gurus of leadership world, Fran Kick. How are you, Fran?
I'm great, Tim. Thanks for setting this up to make it happen.
Absolutely. Of course, Music for All is sponsoring this conversation tonight. Of course, they have the great leadership weekend at the Summer Symposium every summer. There's another one coming up at the end of June this year, so we'll be talking about that some too. But Wayne, we just talked about Wayne Mark with everybody, so he's on the brain. Fran is here. Hey, Wayne, how are you? Fran is here, and he's going to talk about leadership. And I know the first thing you're thinking is, I know all about leadership, but come on, look who's here. This is the man. This is me. And Fran, there's like always something to learn, right?
That is true. And I think the sign of a brilliant leader is one who's always open to keep learning about leadership because once you think you've got it, well, you just don't get it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're watching live right now, I'm here with Fran Kidd. We're going to give you he's got 4 or 5 tips. And this is going to be stuff you don't expect, things about leadership, because we all need to work with our students, have them be more productive, be better leaders. We want to make them into better leaders, and then they can help us more. So you don't have to do everything, everybody. So if you're watching this, please comment, say hello, tell us where you're watching, and ask some questions. I would love for Fran to answer some of your questions. So Fran, a lot of band directors are they don't have a giant staff. Most banders do not have a giant staff. Maybe they're lucky to have a drum person. Maybe they're lucky to have a guard person. But a lot of times their students have to step up and do a lot of those jobs that maybe staff people might do. Hold sectionals, teach drill, run the program.
Absolutely. And be the role models for the next generation of leaders that's going to emerge because we tend to lead like we were led. And that's especially true for high school students. And so if we can be constructive in advance and help prepare our leaders to lead in an effective way, that'll set us up for success longer term than just the season that's coming up. But because we're early, I thought it would be smart to share 4 quick tips that as you're planning for your season to develop leaders, you might consider some of these as ways of doing things differently because we all have an opportunity to kind of reinvent how we do what we do coming out of all this COVID chaos. And this might give you an excuse as a director to kind of expand the leadership opportunities for your students. So my first suggestion would be that if we know that leadership from all aspects of your program is based on a section of some sort, wouldn't it be interesting if we actually had a male and a female section leader for each section in the band program? And this came out of an article that we did for Texas Bandmasters based on research about male and female dynamics when it comes to working in partnership or versus working in domination. And historically speaking, we know that dominating leaders tend to alienate followers. And yet when we work in partnership, suddenly now there's more engagement and buy-in from folks. And so imagine if every section in your band had a male and a female leader designated, you'd have twice as many leaders as you maybe have had in the past. And you know there are students that'll approach a female student leader more comfortably than perhaps a male student leader. And if you have one of each in each section, then you kind of cover your bases. And if the section leader or one of them happens to be sick or absent or out for that rehearsal, you have a backup that's fully aware of everyone in their section and where they're at and how they can make things better. There's a side benefit to this if you're a music educator, and that's you may have noticed that we don't have a whole lot of female band directors in the world. And what would be interesting to note is that throughout history, we tend to pick one leader for each section, and that leader, unfortunately, was usually always a male. And so by diversifying the leadership by section, male and female, we might actually longer term inspire more female band directors to come into the world.
I love that idea. And I think that the idea of having the 2 different types of leaders within this section, because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of conversation going on right now about taking care of students, making them feel safe, making them feel like they belong, making sure everybody feels included. Well, this is just another great idea to do that, because if I know that I have 2 different personalities and I can go to the one that I'm more comfortable with, and gosh, band directors listening, like if all that does is save you a couple times somebody coming up and go, now, when do we load the bus? Like that would be totally worth it just for that. If you're watching this, everybody, I'm talking to the wonderful Fran Kick. We're sharing some great ideas for leadership. And of course, he's the man all about it. And Fran, you guys have the leadership weekend. It's at the very beginning of the summer symposium. I think it's
Right.
June, if I wrote it down right, June 25 through 27.
That's
And
right.
this is like on site. Like this is going to be very exciting.
Yes, in fact, we're reinventing things and bringing back the programming at Ball State University. And if you and your students can make the trip, it's well worth the effort. The Leadership Weekend actually occurs right before the symposium starts. And then Monday, they kick off a whole week long of different experiences for marching band, marching percussion, color guard, drum majors. And it's going to be a great opportunity to bring everybody together once again at Ball State University.
Yeah, and of course the summer symposium is like everybody's heard of that, right? I mean, like Music for All has done a great job with this for years and years and years. Directors can show up and learn, students, of course, and you have the leadership weekend, which I think is fantastic. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, so we're picking his brain now, everybody. We'll be really picking his brain that leadership weekend. But now, Fran, that was a great first tip. By the way, I feel like a lot of times I've had conversations with people about leadership, and they talk about the different styles of leadership. And how it's important to, just not have everybody be like that loud, type A guy or girl. So I like the idea of having the genders, especially in this time where everybody's represented. It seems much more equitable, which it should be. And as you said, different personality types.
Absolutely. And the other thing to consider as a suggestion is that the more people we bring into the leadership process, the more successful your program can be. And leadership isn't just for designated leaders. And so that brings me to suggestion number 2, is that you bring everyone who wants to be in on your leadership development, whether they have a title or not. And so as you start thinking about how you're going to do tryouts and selecting your leaders, and if you have a workshop in advance, or even at the leadership weekend, we always encourage directors to don't just send people who have titles, but send the students one day are going to be a leader in your program, those sophomores or juniors that have a chance to maybe equip themselves in advance of getting that position. Because most band directors will admit that anyone they pick as a section leader in their band earned that title way before they got the title. And so by helping prepare them, we know that students, especially in high school, who have a leadership experience, have a better chance of expressing that leadership in college, which was this study that was done by developing leadership capacity in college students. 50,000 students, tons of different campuses, all kinds of demographics. And the one thing they kind of found in their data collecting is that the students who had a leadership experience in high school were more successful as a leader in college. And so that says a lot about bringing more people into the process of leadership, because at the leadership weekend, we use what's called the social change model of leadership development. And that involves leading as an individual, leading within a group, and then leading within your community at large to create change that improves what we do and how we do it. And the more people we bring in on that process of leadership, whether they have a title or not, the more successful we can be at creating collaboration and constructive engagement with more people in our program. Because leadership is ultimately everybody's job.
Okay, so it doesn't seem like it should be a shock that students that had leadership experience in high school are going to be better leaders. The thing I love, friends, I've had this one. Hey, everybody, thank you for watching. Send in some comments. Let us know. We're here with the wonderful Fran Kick. Music for All is sponsoring this because there's a leadership weekend at the Summer Symposium, which we're looking forward to this year. I'm very excited about it. So here's what I was going to say, Fran. I've had the wonderful the opportunity to speak to people, have podcast conversations for, I guess, like, is it 12 years now? I think it might be 12 years now. And like webinar stuff for at least 4 or 5 now. I lose track of everybody. But anyway, I get to talk to the very top people. And Fran, every time you talk to a band director who's like really successful, really doing a great job, everybody knows that they always say, I'm teaching students. I'm helping to create great citizens. I want to make great young people that are going to go out in the world and make an impact. And we know that our music education world does that, right? We know that we're building great citizens. Yeah. Whatever they end up going out and doing, we all know, we can all say, my time in the music program helped form me and gave me that discipline and that teamwork ethic and all that stuff that we know has helped us. Right. So, if we want to build great young people, let's let's make them into those leaders that we want them to be out there in the world, in the community. I love the idea that, like, why wait until they have that leadership name to start teaching them how to be a leader? Like, make them into, let's teach everybody how to be a leader.
Yeah, yeah. And then the whole point of bringing people in on it, Tim, is even if they are not selected as a leader, you have more people who are in on the process of how leadership works in your program, and they will support and intelligently follow those leaders. Because let's face it, we need better leaders and smarter followers in our world today.
Well, okay, that goes without saying. And yeah, we just need everybody to know how to be a better leader, which means, like being a good person, making smart choices, understanding the big picture, like all this stuff that you're right. That seems like a lot of people around me are sort of missing out on, So I love that. I love that idea very much. Everybody, if you're watching, please comment, ask Fran a question you have, like the leadership guy here. We're talking about the summer symposium, which of course happens in the end of June this year. It's happening in person, and there's a leadership weekend that happens before it. Okay, so Fran, I hope some people are going to ask you some questions since we have you on the line, but go ahead. Let's keep going with this conversation.
Well, and the thing we talked about in terms of preparing for those leaders to be selected and developing leadership in your program is to create a calendar where things are going to shift drastically in your program. So simply, before the summer rehearsals start, bringing all those new members on board, that presents a challenge. How can we prepare not only our leaders, but anyone who wants to be involved in this leadership program to help bring those new members on board? And then, of course, if you do band camp where your rehearsals start to pick up in intensity, that's a moment where things kind of shift. And you could prepare in advance of that shift your leaders and the upperclassmen and the followers on how we're going to do this shift into band camp. And then when I taught with Wayne Markworth, one of the most significant shifts in the program was always when school started. And so how can we prepare our leaders better for that shift once classes start and the pressure of school comes into play? And then, of course, the first performance and maybe the first competition and perhaps the big show at the end of the year. And then don't forget at the end, wrapping things up. So there are points on the calendar that you might want to schedule a leadership experience or training for your students so they can kind of be all on the same page before that transition happens. And you'll have a better prepared band program to deal with that transition.
I was a band director, but I guess you guys know that. I was a band director, and I have to tell you, Fran, like listening to what you just said, I just was like struck with a bit of terror. Because do you know what would be terrifying? I mean, I just had this thought. And the thing is, I think people do this. Don't be that guy, everybody. I think like the students show up for the first day of band camp, and then you decide it's time to train your leader. Like, I think this is what people do. Like, they just name them, and then like the first day, they just assume that Susie Clarinet is going to be like on it. Come on, everybody. We have to prepare them. So planning and teaching them and preparing them well before their job starts. And of course, those students are probably nervous too. They want to feel like they know what they're doing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the better we prepare students, it's also a great example for us as directors to let them know that we're thinking ahead. We want our students to be thinking ahead and planning ahead. We need to do the same thing and model that for them. And even though it might be 2 weeks before band camp begins or the first freshman hasn't even shown up yet, think about that kind of perspective. How are we going to reach out to those students before they arrive? How are we going to deal with them when they arrive? How are we going to make sure we follow up after that first rehearsal when the students who are new members go back to their parents and go, I don't think I can do this. And those student leaders can assume a lot of that communication responsibility and nurturing the relationship so that those students experience a great onboarding, if you will, to your season.
Yeah, and one of the great things that has happened during this whole disruption is that people have really started to figure out and get really good at sort of digital communication. And we had lots and lots of band directors that I know that figured out how to reach out to their upcoming new high school members and bring them into the fold, have Zoom fun things with their section, get to know people so they're not just showing up cold on that first day. And the retention goes way, way up. If they all know their other friends and then they have that first couple hard days of band camp.
Yeah.
But they already know the rest of the trumpet section standing around them. They're much less likely to go home and not finish and not follow through. So it just we have all these new tools that people have learned to use. Let's keep using them in this way too.
Well, and the interesting thing, if you, from a corporate business side of things, we know that when people leave a job in corporate America, more often than not, it's not because of the money or the schedule or anything like that. It's the person they report to. It's their direct supervisor or boss. Well, let's translate it into retention in the marching band. If that new member in a marching band doesn't have a good experience with their section leader, there's a challenge keeping them in band. And how can we make sure that relationship is strong and constructive so they'll want to come back and ultimately want to be that section leader when they get to be that age in the program as well?
I mean, I got to tell you, Fran, that is an angle I have never really heard about, making sure your leaders know what they're doing. But that makes perfect sense. Like, that's the person I'm going to report to. That's the person I'm going to look up to. And it's probably the person that's going to have perhaps the biggest influence on how I feel about things during those first times.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. My last suggestion, and this is certainly because of lots of chaos that we've experienced, but we have first aid classes for helping people who get injured, and health and safety is an important thing. Let me suggest that every band director who hears this or is thinking about their next season, that they tap into a mental health professional or counselor resource at their school or in their community that could kind of be on call to help you and advise you on how best to deal with the stress that lots of students and parents, by the way, have been under over these last couple of years. And there's a great course called Mental Health First Aid, and you can find it at mhfa.org. And they have a program not only for adults to take, but for teens to take, so they can identify and deal with some of the symptoms of mental health challenges as they arise, rather than after they arise. And this might be a great way to prepare yourself as an educator, perhaps all the staff that work with you, and even your section leaders that could take this kind of a course and gain some insight on how to deal with that. Because I know as we continue to gear back up, the mental stress of everything we've been through and the challenges that schools are facing is just at an all-time high. And if we know that half the mental illnesses that people experience start by the age of 14, and 75% of mental health challenges occur by their mid-20s, we are ripe in that age range where people start to be challenged with how they deal with their mental health. And wouldn't it be smart to be better prepared as an educator and your student leaders to deal with those challenges with that mental health first aid approach?
And this is great advice for any time. But of course, it's really, really extra good advice right now because people have been struggling. Young people have felt really isolated. We know that a lot of young people especially are really well, everybody around us is struggling. We can all feel that, right? And I feel like I'm lucky because I've been able to learn how to construct in my own life sort of a system of friends that I call and people that help me and all kinds of stuff so that I know I can sort of take care of myself. But I don't think everybody has the advantage of having that. I feel very lucky to have either learned to do that or know how to do it or been able to do it or whatever. So that makes perfect sense to me that we need to do that part too, especially right now.
Yeah, it's a great resource. And I'm guessing most school districts will give teachers professional development credit for going through that course. It's a very short, simple course, but it holds you kind of accountable with some of the strategies that you can use with students and yourself. Because as you mentioned, Tim, we're all coping in one way, shape, or form with the challenges of life. But when you start to add that family dynamic on top of it, I don't think as educators we can count on the fact that every kid in our band program is going to go back to a family that's going to help them cope constructively. Because a lot of people in families deal with stress in different ways. And if you're an adult and you choose to deal with it in a destructive way, that's not a good role model for that kid. And so how can we get to that kid in our band program so that we know they're getting some constructive leadership and mental health coaching?
That's just great advice, everybody. So if you didn't catch that, rewind this video and watch that part again, because I think that's really, really good advice. And I do think that, Fran, I used to say when I was a band director, like if you had a student that was struggling with some sort of issue, you just had to meet the parent, and there you could see, no offense, parents, but like, come on, we all grow up and learn from our parents. And a lot of times I saw, okay, well, now I see why the student is acting out this way or whatever. And I don't mean that to like call out the parents, but I'm just saying, we know that's how this works. So let's do everything we can. And of course, Fran, as I said before, we all are here to help students grow, be better people, be more successful, have a great life, go out there and be leaders in our society. It's another piece of it that's really important.
Well, and you remember we talked about the calendar and preventing the chaos before it happens proactively with your student leaders. Here's another suggestion. You have parent booster meetings, and perhaps before we go to band camp, you take a little time at that booster meeting to inform the parents about what could or not happen constructively for band camp, and get them prepared on how to deal with that stress as well, so that they know, oh, this is what I could expect, here's what I could respond with, and give them some tools to help encourage their student to stick with it and persevere. And yes, it's going to get harder, just like life gets harder. And here's a great example for how you can handle that while band camp happens, for example, or the first big performance and everyone gets nervous and doesn't sleep the night before and doesn't eat very well because their stomach feels, and you're like, no, you got to eat. Please have a meal, drink a lot of water. Those things from parents could help as well.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because we do the least good job. How can I say this better? We do a good job with our staff and our students, because we see them all the time. We're constantly telling them, this is the philosophy of our program, this is what's important, this is how we act at the contest. But it's really, people tend to not do that with the parents as much, and they're part of our band family and community. And so I think we have to do a better job of making sure we take the time to share all of those philosophies and important things, and this is how we act, and this is why we're doing this show, and you have to do all that with the parents too. So it makes sense that you're sharing that here. It reminds me, I had a wonderful friend who told me about the year he was on the staff, one of the directors at a band, and it looked like they might win Grand Nationals. Like, it's just, the season was kind of going in that direction. It was kind of like, and so they started figuring out, okay, we need to prepare our band family for what might happen, because that's a big deal and not everybody knows how to react. And I remember him saying to me, we specifically made sure that we reached out and talked to our band parents about, hey, we might win this thing. And if so, here's the way you need to act. Here's the way, this is what's important. It's not about the score, blah, blah, blah. And they had to set their band family up for that possible outcome too. I feel we all need to do that with our band parents. They need to know, how do they act if we win a contest? How do they act if we lose a contest? Yes. How do they act, when we're in the stands? Do we cheer for everybody? Like that kind of stuff. They just don't automatically know it. Right. And so the idea of that being part of the concept of what you're talking about with leadership today makes sense to me.
Yeah, and parents are leading in their family. And so how can we bring them in on the leadership process to encourage their students to be constructive rather than critical? And we might even give parents some language to use when they talk about, how did you do at the show, rather than say, what place did you get? What was your performance like, you as a person? Was that your best performance? Did you feel really good about fixing the things that you worked on the week before? And talk more about the process than the product. And one of the cool things that happened, 15 years ago at Bands of America and Music for All with their summer symposium is, any parent that came to symposium for the final concerts at the end of the week on Saturday gets to have a free breakfast on us. And so we'll bring them in for breakfast and then kind of share with them, okay, here's a bit about what your students have experienced for the last week. And there might be some ways to help them kind of decompress out of this back into your family life, their band season. And so we give the parents some strategies and approaches to let their students vent or to reflect, or to kind of think about how they did what they did at the symposium and what they can bring back into their program. And most of the parent reviews from that session in particular are very appreciative of the fact that, thank you for helping me as a parent know how to help my student continue the learning long after the symposium is done. And that can happen for a band director, like you mentioned, your colleague. not only if you're on the verge of great success, but I would say prepare them for great failure too. And that idea that here are 3 ways this might happen of the many that could. And here's how we would like our parents to respond, our students to respond, our community to respond. And that's a great lesson right there.
Yeah, and you have to prepare them. You have to explain to them, here's why we might not win this show. Here's why we might come in last place, because we've prioritized this, or here's the scoring system, or here's where we are in our journey this season. Like there's all kinds of reasons that judging goes the way it does. And we need to do some education on that. I love that story about the end of the summer symposium. This year's summer symposium, everybody, Music for All does this so well. Symposium is June 27th through July 2nd. And if you're watching this video, wherever you're watching it, there is the link to go there and find out more about it is on the description of this video. So you can just click on it and go and check out about the camps and everything that are happening. And Fran, your leadership weekend, which is so cool, happens right before it. June, am I right? 25th through 27th this year?
That's right. The weekend before it, we about usually a third to half the camp comes in advance for that leadership weekend. And then they experience the different tracks of the symposium. And that opportunity to continue the leadership development during the week is something that I do with some faculty. So every student in every division or track of the summer symposium gets a leadership, team building, group dynamic lesson each day throughout the week as well. And we count on those leadership lessons to make the symposium work, obviously, when you have that many students on campus, but then to take those lessons and bring them back into their band program and bring them to life there as well.
Yeah, I love it. I have to tell you, Music for All is very smart to have you around, Fran. Like you're such an important part of everything that they do during that, especially and otherwise. And I think it's very cool. And I just want to say thank you, Fran. Like you have spent much of your career working on these kinds of issues, helping students be better leaders, helping everybody be more successful, build their band culture. Like, thank you for doing that really hard work because it's made a difference.
Well, you're very kind. And I think there's a big difference in the way Music for All develops leadership in students than anywhere else because it's developmentally appropriate for a high school student musician. It's not some book report from a corporate how to lead book or those kinds of things. This is actually built developmentally for the students where they're at and moves them from themselves to the group and lead into the community. And that's such an important thing that they experience at this early age so that, again, they have some momentum as they go into college and pursue other things. Jeremy Earnhardt, Dr. Earnhardt, the CEO of Music for All, is fond of saying, we're not in the business of developing professional musicians or in the business of developing professional people. And we simply use music as our method to do that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if I'm a band director and I'm going to start band camp somewhere probably in early July, like the idea of getting my students all excited and revved up and learning all these things, and then they're going to come out of that with all that energy and knowledge and excitement and bring that to my program. That's a pretty cool setup to have your season go really well. So I love that that's happening. Everybody go follow the link to find out more about the Music for All camp and the summer symposium. Fran, I think it's going to be I'm excited that it's happening again in person this year.
Well, and imagine if you select these leaders, and some booster programs will actually provide a small scholarship or stipend to help pay part of the way to go to camp. If you had 2 section leaders from every section of your band participate in this experience and then bring that back, you could see a huge difference instantly in the quality of leadership across your entire program, rather than just sending the drum majors or maybe the color guard captain or the drum captain. Again, why not send everyone from every section so they can all be on the same page when they come back into your program?
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's a fantastic opportunity. And I'm glad that you're a part of it, Fran, because you do such a great work with all this. And everybody, if you've been watching this conversation and Fran and all his really great advice and tips that he's been sharing with us, and you thought it was helpful, tell somebody about it. It's here on social media. It's going to be, the videos are always up after the fact. So Fran, this has been a really fun conversation. What do you want to say as we're closing?
Well, I just appreciate the fact that students engaged in music education are learning way more than notes and rhythms and marching steps and dance moves. They're learning how to work with other people in a larger organization than themselves. And for many programs, it's the largest organization on campus. It's a lot larger than the basketball team or the football team or the volleyball team or any of those other, student council. And so when a student gets to engage in leadership development with a large organization like that, that's setting them up for success longer term than just this particular season.
Yeah, and band programs are important to schools. They're important to communities. We are one of the faces representing our school, our community, wherever we go, and all the things that we do. So, investing in those students, making the program as successful as possible, building the culture of the program, it's really important stuff. Fran, thanks for your great work here. Thank you for sharing these tips with me today.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate all that you do.
Absolutely. Everybody, like I said, the link to find out more about the Music for All Summer Symposium and the Leadership Weekend, the link is right here where this video is located. Fran, thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, Tim.